one you're most likely to run into while you're in a Jeffco open space park is prairie rattlesnake. Not that people don't run into mountain lions or black bears, it's just less common. So I'd like to get started with rattlesnakes just because it's probably a little bit more relevant to what you're doing, particularly because you guys are timing your runs to when rattlesnakes like to be active. So reptiles, well, the wisdom that people generally spread around is that cold-blooded animals like reptiles like to be hot. And so they want to be out right now when it's sun beating down, the heat's radiating off of rocks. That's when they want to sit out there. And the truth of the matter is rattlesnakes like a core body temperature. It's about 10 degrees lower than ours to operate on. And they don't like to be excruciatingly hot. In fact, if they overheat, they can die just the same as we can by lack of oxygen or too much strain on their body, their proteins all denaturing. So they like to be outside when we like to be outside. If you think it's pleasant temperature outdoors, there's a good chance that rattlesnakes also feel the same way. I've seen rattlesnakes active above the ground on the surface, basking in the mid-50 degree range, and they can be out even into 90s if they're sitting in the shade somewhere, but they're generally not going to be out in the sun if it's 90 degrees out. They're going to be laid over in some grass. But when you come out in the morning, or if you run later in the evening as the temperatures start to drop off, that time of the year right now where that's when the pleasant temperatures are, that's when the rattlesnakes are active. You can kind of set your watch by when their activity will be. In the spring, they tend to be at midday when it's a little warmer. Then it's more like 70s degrees, low 80s. They like that temperature. Same thing in the fall. Winter is about the only time you're not going to consistently run into them unless you know where their den sites are. If you are happening to be walking around over at South Table Mountain or some of the other places with lots of rock outcrops, you can walk by on a day in December and see a pile of rattlesnakes out basking. But they're generally not out on the move at that point in time because the nighttime lows are too much for them and they would die. So they have to stay pretty close to their overwintering site. So if you see a rattlesnake on a trail, generally speaking, it's going to be stretched out. It's not going to look generally to start off with like this. This is a very excited animal. It's reared itself up off the ground and is ready to rock and roll, ready to defend itself. Generally, when you run into a rattlesnake, it's going to be stretched out in the line. It's either going to be holding still, basking, trying to get some warmth, or it'll be actively cruising across the trail. One of the reasons why we say stay on trail at all times is just because snakes will use trails to bask and they'll cross them sometimes, but they prefer habitat edges. So one of the number one places that we tend to find rattlesnakes, especially is our tracking study at North Table has been showing us, is right next to a trail. There's a really good spot for them to hide. So they'll sit in the dappled sunlight there. They're waiting for rodents to come by. Small mammals really like to use our trails as highways. And they can duck into the tall grass when they need to, but they can move quickly along it. And rattlesnakes smell their trails, and so they sit and wait next to the trail for a small mammal to run by. What that it means as a consequence for us is that if there's a snake right in the grass next to you and you're not paying attention and you have your earbuds in, anything like that, and you don't hear it give a warning rattle, there is a possibility that you could take a bite on your ankle, which we don't recommend. So while you're out on trails, in order to avoid having an unwanted negative encounter with a rattlesnake, staying on a trail is your best option. If you're going to do anything off trail ever, which you won't be probably when you're running, but if any other time you're recreating, wear long pants and closed-toed shoes. Generally, if the pants are loose, that's going to give you a little more protection. Rattlesnakes are pit vipers, so they have really long fangs relative to their body, and they fold up into the top of the mouth. So a very large animal, and we don't tend to get them this big here, can have 3/4 inch long fangs, which seems like a lot, but if they snag on a piece of clothing, something like that, they're not going to deliver a venomous bite that's going to be very dangerous to you. Most of our rattlesnakes are 2 to 3 feet long, so not very big, nothing like the western diamondbacks and eastern diamondbacks you see south of here. So when you see one, we don't advise you ever to engage with a rattlesnake. So that includes attempting to kill a rattlesnake. That includes attempting to move a rattlesnake. or to otherwise haze it or harass it. We do advise people to haze problem coyotes that are too aggressive. We can talk a little bit about that here in a minute. But rattlesnakes are not very smart. They don't understand that you just want them to move away. They don't get a threat display. Anything that comes up to them and tries to engage with them like that, they're going to assume this is a predator. It wants to kill me. And so if you throw rocks at them, it just makes them more angry, makes them more afraid. They're more likely to sit tall and just hold on to their position. What tends to happen a lot of the time is one person will run into a snake on a trail and they just won't leave it alone. They'll stand around it and everybody will be scratching their head and problem solving, and they'll have surrounded it so it doesn't have a place to go and it feels like it's about to be eaten by a bunch of predators. So the snake is not going to move off in that case. So if you see one, if you take about 30 steps back or so and you wait 30 seconds, the snake will probably have moved on. They don't want to see you. They're terrified of you. Everything your size that runs into them is a potential lethal threat to them. Even mule deer will occasionally stomp on rattlesnake heads. Particularly mothers who have had fawns bit by them before on accident, things like that. So just remember that the snake is very nervous, and if you give it space, it'll end up moving off on its own 9 times out of 10. And if you see other people trying to haze snakes or trying to get close to them, trying to move them, please advise them not to do that. The bites that are most prevalent tend to be in men, not in women. And men tend to be bit on their hands rather than on their feet, where women tend to be bit because women generally have more legitimate rattlesnake bites. You're surprised by them. Men tend to have more illegitimate bites where they're messing with the snake. Make of that what you will, it's statistics. But yeah, it's so, you know, anytime anybody's trying to be a hero, discourage them not to. The animal is in its environment. It'll move off on its own if you give it space.
Do you see dogs bitten by snakes?
Yes.
My dog loves to exploring the edge of the trail, even on the leash.
Mm-hmm. And that is a more prevalent bite that we tend to see. Generally, we'll have one rattlesnake bite per year on our 55,000 acres of a person, and we may have 2 to 3 that are dogs that tend to be bit. If a person is bit by a rattlesnake, what you want to do as far as first aid is concerned is stay very calm, call 911, follow the instructions of the dispatcher. Just running to any hospital without calling ahead is not generally a good idea, just because not all hospitals stock antivenom. Not all hospitals have toxicologists who know how to treat venomous animal bites. They may apply the antivenom inappropriately by injecting it into the bite site. This is not going to help you, and it's going to waste a lot of your money. So call the 911 dispatcher and follow their instructions. They'll know what to do. The only other first aid you really need to do other than to stay calm is remove any restrictive clothing, jewelry, etc., because the hallmark of a snake bite is extreme swelling. You will blow up like a balloon in the area that you were bit. However, it's not life-threatening provided you go and get your self-treatment. It's very rare for people to have immediate life-threatening effects from a snake bite. It tends to be people who are in the unlucky pool that are allergic to them. That's pretty unusual, and it tends to be mostly people who've worked with them for 20 to 30 years and have been breathing aerosolized venom the entire time. Their body's built up this crazy secondary immunity. So people who don't spend a lot of time with venomous snakes, like you, are at less risk than people like me who spend way too much time with them. So when if you are out somewhere remote and you don't have phone access, you can walk yourself out. You can even drive yourself to a hospital, provided that you're staying calm. And it does hurt, it is painful, it gets worse over time, so you do want to go and get help.
Is there a medical reason to stay calm, or it's just
There is a medical reason to stay calm. The more you are panicking, the more you're circulating things through your blood. Rattlesnake venom in this area is almost entirely hemotoxic. You want to minimize how far and how quickly it moves through your system when it gets into your bloodstream, because it's essentially meat tenderizer. When it gets into you, it'll cause immediate necrosis. It destroys tissue. If you take rattlesnake venom and put it into a vial of blood, it'll turn the blood black and curdle it. It's nasty stuff. It's not going to, like I said, it's not going to kill you, but if you don't get medical attention, you can end up losing fingers, you can lose nerves, you can lose ligaments and mobility in the extremity where you took the bite. But at 99.9% when people go and take care of it as quickly as they can, there's no long-term effect. The major problem is the cost. Each vial of Crofab, the polyvalent antivenom that they're going to treat a rattlesnake bite with here, it retails at about $1,100 right now. If you take a bite from a large rattlesnake, you may need as little as 4 vials and as many as 32 in order to treat a bite.
Health insurance doesn't cover it?
It depends on your insurance, and that's something you can ask about. Some people that take bites find out that they were not covered, so you'll want to check into that and make sure. My advice is do everything you can to avoid a bite, and it can be done. It really can be. It's mostly a matter of just awareness, making sure that you understand that snakes live everywhere in Colorado, up to 9,000 feet. If you're in scrub habitat or grassland habitat like this, if you get up into ponderosa forest up there, or you get down in sandhills, plains, cottonwood galleries, all of it's rattlesnake habitat. They'll live anywhere. There are a lot of small mammals for them to eat, and there are lots of small mammals that live in all of these habitats, so the prairie rattlesnakes can make that work. Really, just above tree line is the only place I'd say you're 100% okay, and you don't have to worry about it. If you go to Arizona or New Mexico, the rules change. They go higher. There are rattlesnakes that prefer to live 9,000 feet or higher in other places, so I always advise people to get familiar with their other snakes. The good news is rattlesnakes are the only dangerously venomous snakes in Colorado. We do not have coral snakes. We have a red, white, and black snake here called the milk snake. That is a king snake that mimics coral snakes, but it's completely harmless, and in fact likes to eat rattlesnakes and lives underground. So they're people don't tend to run into them as much. It's kind of a treat when they do. They get very excited about it. But yes.